The afternoon sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of George's apartment, casting everything in warm honey-cooled light. I'd been there for 3 hours, and nobody was supposed to know. My name is Michael Chen, and at 26 years old I was still living a carefully constructed double life. By day I was the responsible older cousin, the one who helped my parents run their family business, people who attended family dinners without fail, who kept my sexuality locked away in a compartment labeled later or never, depending on how pessimistic I felt. Late afternoon, when the world seemed to move more slowly and the family was distracted with their own lives, I was someone else entirely. George was different from me in almost every way that mattered. Where I was careful and measured, he was spontaneous. When I planned every conversation in advance, terrified of saying the wrong thing, he spoke with a confidence that made my chest ache. He had golden brown skin, dark curls that fell across his forehead when he laughed, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. We'd met 8 months ago at a gallery opening, the kind of event I'd attended alone, where I could pretend I was just appreciating modern art when really I was absorbing the energy of a space where I could be myself. George worked at the gallery as a curator. He'd approach me while I was standing in front of an abstract painting, and instead of the usual pleasantries, he'd ask me what I saw in it. I told him the truth: chaos, trying to become something beautiful, but never quite sure if it will. He'd smiled, then a slow, genuine smile, and said, maybe the uncertainty is what makes it beautiful. That had been the beginning of everything. Now George stood in the kitchen out of his modest one-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg, making coffee. The domestic simplicity of it, this man I loved making coffee while soft music played from the speakers, felt impossibly luxurious. Luxurious because it was stolen, luxurious because I had to schedule these moments like business appointments, blocking off time on my calendar under client meetings or personal errands. Penny for your thoughts? George asked, turning with the steaming mugs. He wore a faded Colia sweatshirt and gray sweatpants. His hair was still damp from the shower we'd shared an hour before. The intimacy of that moment, standing under warm water with another person, the vulnerability of it, still made my skin tingle. Just thinking about how much I wish we could do this more often, I said, taking the offered mug. Normal things, just existing together without a countdown timer. George settled onto the couch beside me, our thighs touching. He was always comfortable with physical closeness. I was still learning how to stop flinching from it. We could, he said quietly. You know that, right? You could just tell them. This was the recurring conversation, the one that happened in different forms throughout our 8 months together. George wanted more. He wanted me to stop hiding. He wanted us to be real in the way that mattered, not just in this apartment, but in the world, in my life, in the parts that actually counted. It's not that simple, I said, the words worn smooth from repetition. My family has expectations, the business, the traditions. In my community, being gay isn't just a personal thing. It affects how my parents are perceived and affects the family standing. There's already so much pressure. I know, George interrupted gently. He always did this: listen to my explanations and accept them, while still making it clear he didn't think they were good enough. It was one of the things I loved about him, even as it terrified me. I just want more time with you. I want to be able to text you without wondering if you're going to see it. I want to take you to dinner without going to restaurants and neighborhoods where we won't run into anyone. You. No, I know, I echoed back. I'm working on it, I promise. But the promise felt thin. I wasn't working on it. Not really. I was maintaining the status quo, enjoying these stolen hours, telling myself that eventually I would find the courage to change everything. Someday, when things were different, when I was ready. The thing about living a double life is that you get very good at compartmentalizing. You develop a skill for keeping the pieces separate, for making sure one part never touches the other. It's a useful skill until it isn't anymore, until the wall comes down. That wall came down on a Tuesday. At 3:47 p.m. I was lying on George's bed, my head on his chest. He was asleep, his breathing deep and even. One arm draped across my waist. I was awake, as I often was during these moments, unable to fully relax into happiness, because happiness felt like something that could be taken away at any moment. I was thinking about calling my mother back. She texted an hour ago asking where I was when I heard it. The sound of a key in the lock. For a moment I didn't move. I couldn't process what that meant, couldn't make my brain understand that the one carefully controlled variable in my life had just become uncontrolled. George's eyes opened, and I saw the moment he realized too. His arm tightened around me. Did you forget to lock the door? I whispered, even though whispering wouldn't help. I always locked the door open. My cousin Jack stood in the doorway holding a spare key that George had apparently given him weeks ago for emergencies. Jack was 2 years younger than me, married with a daughter, the kind of guy who embodied every traditional expectation I'd grown up with. He came to family dinners and talked about his investment portfolio and played golf on weekends with my father. The look on his face went through several stages in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, understanding, shock, and then finally something that looked almost like betrayal, not directed at me specifically, but at a version of the world he thought he understood that had just revealed itself to be fundamentally different than he believed. Oh my God, he said. Then again, oh my God. I sat up, scrambling for my shirt. Beside me, George had pulled the blanket up to his chest, his expression closing off in a way that made me ache. I'd never seen him defensive before. He was always so open, so unafraid. But right now, watching my cousin stare at us, his face cycling through emotions, George looked small. Jack, I started, but I had no idea what came next. There was no manual for this, no section in my mental playbook titled, "If your cousin catches you with your boyfriend, why are you here?" George asked, his voice steadier than mine. You need to respect people's privacy. Jack looked at George like he was something he'd found in his apartment by accident. Then his eyes came back to me. Michael, what? I don't understand. I can explain, I said, though. Couldn't, not really. Not in a way that would fit into the framework of understanding my cousin possessed. Does the family know? He asked suddenly. Do Mom and Dad know about this? The question hung in the air between us like a physical thing. The truth was simple. No, no one knew. I was a walking secret, a man living in the margins of my own life, and the person I loved most in the world was relegated to those same margins. Not yet, I said quietly. Not yet, Jack repeated. He looked stunned. Almost hurt. Michael, you can't just, you have to tell them, you can't keep living like this. It was the same thing George had been saying for 8 months, and hearing it from Jack, conventional, traditional Jack, hit differently. It hit like a truth I'd been avoiding. I heard myself say, I'm going to. Jack didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stood in the doorway of George's bedroom like he was processing a crime scene, trying to understand the geography of a world that had shifted beneath his feet. Eventually, George asked him to wait in the living room. I dressed quickly, my hands shaking. I'm sorry, I said to George, and the inadequacy of those two words felt like its own kind of violence. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry to me, George said, and there was something in his tone that scared me more than Jack's shock had. Be honest with yourself and with me. We need to talk about what this means. When I emerged into the living room, Jack was sitting on the edge of George's minimalist couch, looking deeply uncomfortable. He was holding a coffee mug that he clearly didn't want to be holding, as if it might contaminate him. Listen, he said when he saw me, I'm not going to tell anyone. If that's what you're worried about, that's not why I came over. I was supposed to pick up that Sonos speaker I lent George for his party. Remember, you said you'd tell me when I could get it. The mundanity of it was almost comical. We were having a life-altering confrontation because of a speaker, except it wasn't about the speaker, and we both knew it. I appreciate that, I said carefully, sitting in the chair across from him. I know this is shocking. Jack laughed, a short, brittle sound. Michael, you're getting married. Mom and Dad have been talking about it for months. They want a big wedding. They want to invite everyone. They want to see you settled down. There it was. The weight of expectation was tangible. The reason I've been living this lie. My mother had started the campaign 2 years ago. Subtle at first, then more aggressive. She'd mentioned women she thought I'd like, daughters of family friends, women who were educated and beautiful and suitable. She'd mentioned my age, the importance of family legacy, the way that children centered a person's life and gave it purpose. She said these things with love. That was the complicated part. She genuinely believed she was pushing me toward happiness. I know, I said to Jack, I know all of that. So what's the plan? His voice had shifted into problem-solving mode, which I recognized as his way of processing. Are you going to call off the wedding idea? Are you going to tell them now, or are you waiting for something to happen that forces your hand? The second option hung there between us like a threat, like a timer. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't figured it out yet. Well, you better figure it out fast, Jack said. But he didn't sound angry. He sounded sad, because living like this, Michael, I love you and I don't understand it, and I definitely don't understand how you kept it from all of us, but I don't want to watch you destroy yourself trying to be someone you're not. After Jack left, taking a speaker with him, the conversation unresolved, I called my mother. This is important to understand. I didn't call her because I had decided to tell her. I called her because I needed to pretend that everything was normal. I needed to ground myself in the familiar rhythm of our relationship before the ground shifted entirely. Michael, finally, she said when she picked up. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. I was in a meeting. I lied. The lie came so easily. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I was just calling to confirm about the Dinner this weekend. The Wongs are coming and I want to make sure you remember their daughter just came back from her MBA program in Boston. She's very accomplished. Michael, your father, says she got offered a job at Goldman Sachs, but she's considering other options. I closed my eyes. I could see the trajectory of this sentence, where it was heading. My mother was already doing the arithmetic, imagining futures that didn't exist. Mom, I need to talk to you about something, I said. There was a pause. I could feel her attention sharpen, could imagine her sitting up straighter in the kitchen where she always took calls. What is it? Are you okay? Is the business having problems? No, everyone's fine. I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen without interrupting. I took a breath. Jack's face, George's eyes when he'd said we needed to talk. The weight of 8 months of lies piled on top of 26 years of silence. I'm gay, I said. The line didn't go dead, but it felt like it. The silence stretched between us, a living thing. Michael, my mother finally said, and her voice was strange. What are you talking about? That's not. You're not. I am, I said. I have been my whole life. I just never told anyone. Does your father know? No. You're the first person I'm telling. Another silence. I could hear my mother breathing, could imagine her processing this information in the same careful way she processed every problem in her life, by immediately trying to reorganize it into something manageable, something that made sense according to the rules. She understood. We need to talk about this in person, she said finally, not over the phone. This is a conversation we need to have properly. Okay, I said. Come to dinner tomorrow night, just you. We'll talk before your father gets home from work. Okay, I repeated. When I hung up, I realized I was shaking. I called George. I told my mother. I said when he answered, you what? I told her I'm gay. I'm going to talk to both my parents tomorrow night. There was silence on George's end, and then, are you sure you're ready for this? No, I said, but I don't think I'm ever going to be ready. I think I just have to do it. And then what? George asked, and I heard the vulnerability in his voice, the version of himself he tried to hide under all that confident exterior. What happens after you tell them? I don't know, I said, but I do know that I want to find out with you. I don't want to keep living like I'm ashamed of you. Because I'm not. I'm ashamed of myself for being afraid, but never of you. The next day passed in a fog of anxiety and anticipation. I went through the motions. At work, helped a client with the spring collection they were planning to launch. Sent emails and attended a meeting. None of it registered. I was a ghost, moving through my own life, waiting for the moment when the ground shifted. A T500. I drove to my parents' house. My mother was waiting in the kitchen, sitting at the table with 2 cups of tea already poured. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was taller. Now strengthened by the truth of who I was. Sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I sat. The tea was cooling, a faint steam rising from the surface. I want to understand, my mother said carefully, so I need you to explain it to me. When did you realize this, and why didn't you tell us? I told her. I told her about feeling different as a child, about the weight of expectations, about the way I'd learned to be invisible to protect myself. I told her about trying to be what the family needed before I was even old enough to understand what I needed. And I told her about George. I love him. Mom, I said, I No, that probably doesn't matter to you right now, and I understand if it doesn't, but I needed you to know I'm not sick, I'm not confused, and I'm not going to change my mind. This is who I am. My mother listened without interrupting, which somehow made it harder. When I finished, she picked up her tea and took a long sip, though it must have been cold by then. Your father, she said, will not react well to this. I know the family will have questions, there will be complications. I know, but she said, and she reached across the table and took my hand. You are my son before you are anything else, before you are the heir to a business or the keeper of family tradition or any of that. You are my son, and I have failed you if I have made you feel like you couldn't tell me the truth. I felt tears on my face before I realized I was crying. I have so many questions, my mother continued, and I'm sure I'm going to say some very stupid things as I try to understand. But I love you, Michael. That doesn't change. The conversation with my father was harder. He arrived home from work to find my mother and me sitting at the dinner table, and immediately he knew something was wrong. My parents had been together for 30 years. They had a language of silence that communicated volumes. What's happened? He asked, the professional mask he wore in the world falling away to reveal concern. Michael has something to tell you, my mother said. The words came out more easily the second time, or maybe they were just as hard, but I was already numb from having said them once. My father listened with his face growing increasingly distant, increasingly difficult to read. When I finished, he stood up and walked to the window, his back to both of us. The silence stretched. I thought about that painting George had first asked me about, chaos trying to become beautiful, never quite sure if it would. I don't understand, my father said finally, still facing the window. I have provided for you. I have given you everything, and this is how you repay that, by lying to us, by living this kind of life. It's not a repayment, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I can't spend the rest of my life pretending to be someone I'm not. I can't marry a woman I don't love. I can't build a life on a foundation of lies. My father turned to face me then, and I was shocked to see that he looked older than he had that morning, as if the truth had aged him. What about the business? He asked. Business will be fine, I said. I'm still the same person. I'm still competent. I'm still going to work hard. The only thing that's changed is that I'm not pretending anymore. Your family will reject you, he said bluntly. Your extended family, your cousins, the community we've built. You understand that? I think that's probably true, I said, and I'm terrified of that, but I'm more terrified of living a lie. My father sat back down at the table. He looked at me like I was a stranger. He was trying to find some familiar landmark, and I need time, he said. I need time to understand this, to understand you. That's fair, I said. What I didn't expect was that he would actually take that time. Over the following weeks, my father asked questions. Some of them were ignorant, some were offensive, some came from a genuine place of trying to understand his son. My mother mediated many of these conversations, pushing back gently when my father said something hurtful, encouraging him to listen when I explained something about my experience. Jack became an unlikely ally. He talked to my father, framed things in language my father could understand. He brought His perspective as someone who had no stake in the family business, no pressure to perform a particular role. He was just a cousin who loved his cousin and wanted him to be happy. Month after that conversation, I brought George to dinner my mother had prepared extensively. I later learned she'd spent time on LGBTQ plus websites, watching videos, reading parents' accounts of coming out conversations. She wanted to get it right. My father had spent the month oscillating between angry silence and awkward questions, but he'd committed to showing up. When George arrived, he was nervous in a way I'd never seen. He wore a nice button-down shirt instead of his usual casual style, and I could tell he'd had his hair cut. He was trying to fit into my world, which broke my heart a little because he shouldn't have had to try. He should have been accepted as he was, but he was there. He was willing to walk into the unknown with me. Dinner was awkward in the way these things often are, but it wasn't hostile. My father asked George about his work at the gallery. George explained his vision for making contemporary art more accessible to communities that had historically been excluded from cultural spaces. My father listened, and while he didn't offer much in response, I could see him filing the information away, trying to reconcile this person with the abstract concept of Michael's boyfriend that he'd been wrestling with for weeks. My father said his dessert was being served when I was Michael's age. I thought I had to be a certain way to be respected. I thought I had to suppress certain parts of myself to be successful in business, to be a good son, to be worthy of my parents' investment in me. He looked at me then, and I saw something shift in his eyes. I spent 40 years learning that lesson. He continued that you can't actually achieve anything meaningful while you're divided against yourself. I don't know how to reconcile what I thought I knew about my son with who you're telling me you are, but I'm going to try, because the alternative, losing you, is not acceptable to me. Later, after George had left and my parents had gone to bed, I sat on my childhood bed and let myself cry again. They were different tears from before. These weren't tears of fear, but of relief, of the beginning of something like peace. The months that followed were a process of integration, of learning how to be myself fully, not in compartments but all at once. It was messy. There were family members who needed time, family members who struggled, family members who outright rejected me, but there were also family members who surprised me with their capacity to love beyond their assumptions. My business didn't collapse. I performed my job exactly as well as before because I was performing my job, not the elaborate performance of being straight. I worked harder, actually, because I was no longer depleting my energy maintaining a fiction. 3 months after I came out, George asked me to move in with him, not as a secret or a hidden thing, but openly. We found a new apartment in Brooklyn, somewhere that was ours and not hiding. We furnished it together, filled it with the things we loved, hosted dinner parties where my family met the people who mattered to George. 6 months after I came out, my father said something that surprised me. We were working together on a business problem one of our afternoon sessions in the office when he said, "I think I owe you an apology." For what? I asked. For teaching you to be afraid, he said. For creating an environment where you felt like who you were was something to hide. I did that unintentionally, but I did it. I'm sorry. I accepted the apology, though I knew it wasn't something he needed to be forgiven for. He was a man of his generation with the values of his generation, the fact that he was capable of changing those values, of seeing his son as worthy of love exactly as he was, felt like its own kind of grace. A year after I came out, I was sitting on the rooftop of our apartment building, the city spread out beneath us in all its chaotic, impossible beauty. George brought out 2 glasses of wine and settled beside me, his shoulder touching mine. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Any of it coming out taking this risk?" I thought about Jack catching us in that apartment, the shock on his face, the beginning of everything. I thought about sitting at my mother's kitchen table, about my father in the office apologizing for teaching me to be afraid. I thought about building a life that didn't require me to be invisible. "No," I said. "I don't regret it. I regret the time I lost to fear. I regret the months I spent dividing myself into pieces when I could have been whole, but the actual coming out, the actual risk. I would do that again, even though it was hard." George asked. "Especially because it was hard?" I said. "Because the things that are hard are usually the things that matter, because I love you and I love my family and I love myself, and I couldn't do any of those things fully while I was living a lie." George took my hand and we sat there as the sun set over Brooklyn, as the city transformed from afternoon light to evening shadow, to the purple and gold moment that always felt like magic. We sat there in the way that people who truly know each other can sit without needing to fill the silence with words, just existing together in a space we both chosen and build. Below us, the city continued its endless motion. People were coming out, falling in love, discovering themselves. People were also struggling, hiding, afraid. People were building lives in the margins, waiting for the courage that would let them step fully into the light. I had found that courage in it had changed everything. "I love you," George said, pressing his forehead against mine. "I love you too," I replied. And for the first time in my life, those words weren't a secret. They were just a simple truth spoken in the open under the sky, with the whole world watching if it cared to look. The chaos had become something beautiful, and I was no longer uncertain about